This is a follow-up to a video I posted a few days ago, and I'm doing it because things are moving so quickly, but also in response to some people who've contacted me because they're so concerned about the widespread panic in the world regarding COVID-19, the coronavirus, and in particular the psychology of fear surrounding it. So some of what I should go on to say in a bit later are practical suggestions for coping with this, with what is happening, and for putting yourself more in control. But first I want to suggest a deeper context for COVID-19. The writer H.L. Mencken said that the whole aim of practical politics is to keep the populace alarmed and hence clamorous to be led to safety by menacing it with an endless series of hobgoblins, all of them imaginary. And I would add, even better, if there's a real hobgoblin, enter COVID-19, which can be imagined as an apocalyptic biblical terror that only we, the powers that be, can save you from. But you've got to trust us. We may have to restrict your freedoms. We may have to take some or all of your money. We may have to make you very poor. In fact, we may ban cash altogether and go completely digital, but it's all for the best. We're doing this in your best interests. We may have to keep you frightened. We may have to police you more. We may have to stop you interacting. We may have to feed you all manner of fear-mongering through the media, but guess what? We're doing it for you. Now, of course, there are times when some of those things are necessary. Some. But we have to question everything we are told. That's our job as citizens. And also, you can bet your mustard that we are not being told everything, because we never are. You have to, in the modern world, educate yourself. If you want to be informed about what's happening in the world, if you want to be educated, then you must inform yourself and educate yourself. To lazily rely on mainstream media or mainstream education is like sitting down and someone saying, well, here's your breakfast. It's a bowl of complete crap that will make you feel depressed and ill. Now eat it. And you do, and you feel ill and depressed. And they say, hey, we'll be back at lunchtime to give you an even bigger bowl of worse crap. And wow, you should see the pile of buffalo shit we've got lined up for supper. Have a nice day. It is possible to inform and educate yourself, but you can't be lazy and expect to be spoon-fed. You have to dig around, test what you're told against available facts. You have to weigh things up, but above all, be vigilant and question. Annoy the hell out of people by refusing to sing from the official hymn sheet. Otherwise, you may as well die. If we look at what's happened, if you want to control a person, a community, a nation, the world, the best way is to get people to police each other and themselves, which is precisely what has happened. There's the official police, community enforcement officers, and now the army, who will be there to do absolutely necessary jobs, but also to scare people while saying they are protecting them. This is the classic Orwellian doublethink. But we now also police each other. Social distancing, there's a great Orwellian phrase. Viewing others as potential infectors or as rivals for toilet rolls. In a local coffee shop before they were all closed down, a young assistant simply followed the company rules and told a customer that toilets were out of bounds. This customer completely lost his rags, was very abusive and called him a Nazi. He's a young man just doing his job. So we're policing each other and policing ourselves, and there is an underlying hostility in those interactions. We're also terrified that a sneeze may be the death pixie calling. We're isolating ourselves. We are our own jailers, both jailer and prisoner. Now, of course, the sick and the infected should be isolated and given care and love. And of course, we need to take precautions. But my point is that the whole web of suspicion, hostility and fear that has been woven around this is deeply worrying. And there are two fronts, both of which diminish us. One is the mainstream news. They just love it. Every headline drips with doom, especially the BBC. NHS collapsing, millions may be infected, doctors urge conversations about death, army on standby, panic buying, all with lurid pictures of technicolored, triffid-like virus heads. Now, none of this is actually news. It's regurgitating Reuters and what was said yesterday and the day before, like a dog returning to its own vomit. There's no real investigative reporting, no hard questioning, no considered thought. And the other front is social media, which is good and bad. People are using it as comfort food. There are lots of second or third hand bits of advice from someone who knows someone who knows someone. They're what people are doing to cope with self-isolation. Of course, there's nothing wrong with comfort and information sharing. But my sense is that we have mostly swallowed the official narrative and are behaving as compliantly as sheep. I'd love to see more hard questioning, not blaming the government, but a real online debate about what this thing really is, its effects, and where one can find not only solace, but strength and self-determination. And above all, healthy skepticism of all mainstream news and official narratives. Let's by all means have a bunker mentality, but one that's fighting and strong, not submitting meekly and hoping that someone else will make everything all right. So closing pubs and restaurants and coffee shops while supermarkets are teeming, it has, of course, a kind of logic, but it's also a contradiction. Maybe it's necessary, but also consider that pubs, coffee shops, restaurants are where people might meet and behave like civilized human beings and, God forbid, discuss things and make plans. Our centres of conversation, discussion and information exchange are being replaced by Facebook comfort. And while there's a positive side to this, the danger is that we fall deeper into the trap of thinking that virtual contact is real contact. It isn't. Being nice and friendly to someone online that you would fear as a potential health threat on the street is a dangerous dichotomy. It's a tiptoe towards the imposition of AI over reality. There's a German, Dr. Wodak, who's explained that the tests for COVID-19 were done hastily and not purely for humanitarian reasons, but also for financial ones. So taking advantage of global mainstream hysteria and a lack of context for understanding the virus, scientists are tripping over each other to advise politicians because they want to be important in politics and to hoover up money for their institutions and research projects and their personal reputations. What is missing at the moment is an overly rational way of looking at things. Money often rules science, as it does most things. And the real tragedy of the handling of COVID-19 will be economic. The loss of incomes, jobs, homes, independence, security will create a new pit of poverty, an even wider gap between the haves and have-nots, illnesses through malnourishment, and there'll be more fear and depression. It may be that the society that we knew and were already very troubled about was a golden age that will never return. Money and power may well be even more concentrated in the hands of a few, the 1%. I'll be making another video soon about that 1%. The Rothschild cabal owns governments, universities, medicine industry, and they are very smart, but we have to be smarter. And the globalist media has brainwashed millions and millions of people into believing that hysterical behaviour and fear is natural, useful, and even ethical. It's not. And let us not fool ourselves. China's totalitarian government and thinking is a lot to blame for initially downplaying this virus, whatever it turns out to be in its outcome, to the extent of persecuting whistleblowers. So there's echoes of Julian Assange here, we're in the same bed. And the World Health Organization, led by Tedros, a former Ethiopian apparatchik, who was 3 times shown to be lying his head off about outbreaks of cholera. He was in the ruling Chinese elite's pocket and supported China in downplaying the virus. So beware those who support globalism, which is simply the centralizing of power and totalitarianism wearing a different hat. And because we've given over our manufacturing industries to cheap imported goods, often from China, who already supply us with so much, it opens the door for them to come in and buy out our depleted manufacturing resources when this current crisis is over. And the same thing is happening in Australia. And at the very time that the world is becoming more global and centralised, it should be moving towards reclaiming national and local manufacturing so that we are more self-sufficient in times of national need. It's always about power and money. And when the state has too much control, it causes misery. Okay, so there are a few possible ways of coping with this and making yourself more in control. I think of it as little me and the big mountain. If I'm trying to write a book or a play, or I'm facing a challenge in life, it always seems like little me and the big mountain. And what I've discovered is that there are techniques and ways, as perhaps you have, of chopping down the mountain into small, manageable hills that you can more easily traverse. It's changing the relationship. One thing you can do is have a dialogue with your fear. I've been a script writer and a novelist for years, so I spend a lot of time writing things down, but it's not complicated. And there's one I did in my notebook recently about something I was scared of. And I just called this character Fear. And it doesn't matter what the fear was. And this was what I wrote to her. Me. Stop following me around. Fear. I'm not. Yes, you bloody well are. Everywhere I go, you're there. No, it's just a coincidence. I go where I want and you just happen to be there. But you're even in my dreams, in my bed. Well, that's because I find you attractive and sexy. Well, I don't find you attractive and sexy. Why not? Because you smell like a hobgoblin's jockstrap, and you're ugly and stupid and ignorant. Hey, I'm Fear. Remember that. I'm bigger than you. Not now, you're not. Even as I look, you're shrinking. Look at your pathetic little matchsticky legs. Soon you'll be just a tiny little blob of nothing much, and I can put my foot on you and squish. Okay, so it's silly, but that's the point. You're turning something monstrous into something silly, something huge into something small. Plus, you can have just a bit of simple fun doing it. And the time you spend doing it is time you're not frightened or worried. You can do a dialogue with the virus, beat it up, torture it, talk to it. I'm not suggesting that this makes your fear evaporate for good, of course not, but you've changed your relationship with it, and that's important. It's like grief. If you've lost someone in your life, someone that you loved, or an animal that you loved, my experience is that it never goes. This word closure has never meant much to me. But your relationship with it changes. It becomes organic. So sometimes it's with you, sometimes it's further away, sometimes it's hurtful, sometimes it's a source of pleasant memories, but it's organic and your relationship is changing with it, and that's healthy. It's when you're paralyzed and overcome by it that you're in danger. Another thing you can do is take this time to reflect. Let's remember that what we call our leaders are actually our employees. They are on borrowed time and they're at our behest. And their job is not to threaten or punish or hand down rules from an Olympian height. It's not to frighten, not to create medieval scenes of carnage and disease and disaster. Their job, but you need intelligence and imagination for this, is to inspire, to keep order through support and create a sense of collective purpose, and to remind the media that its job is to report and inform, not indoctrinate. A good parliament would encourage this current situation to be an opportunity as well as a problem. Most people will now have time and isolation. So how about this as an idea? Every citizen or every household uses this time to design a blueprint for the sort of society they would like to see once ordinary life resumes. So design a constitution with a few practical suggestions, such as, I don't know, shared shopping. One week I shop for myself and a neighbour, and the next week they shop for me as well as themselves. We save time and petrol and effort. Then all those ideas go into a melting pot. These days a software program could do that, and we have a blueprint for a new British constitution designed by its citizens, keeping the best of the old and introducing the new. Another thing you can do is debits and credits. People think that with some things there's only the debit side. It's all bad. And sometimes perhaps that's true, but very rarely. But as a thought adventure, debits and credits is a useful tool. When you go on a thought adventure, you have to be expansive. You cannot forbid certain thoughts. You cannot think, oh, I mustn't think that. It's not very nice. You have to allow yourself to go into both safe and forbidden territories. That's the whole point, and it's yours. It doesn't matter if others think it's silly or think you're barking mad. That's their problem. So, with the virus, on the debit side, that sort of writes itself, thinks itself, but you could say it's horrible. People get ill, people die, people are frightened, people are suspicious. The health service is overworked and full to breaking point, brings out the worst in people. The economy will take such a pounding, we can only imagine the long-term consequences. There's going to be bankruptcy, lost jobs, depression. Perhaps this is the world punishing us. Flip that and say, okay, what's on the credit side? Okay, the air is cleaner. There are dolphins in the canals of Venice. People are having to appraise what's really important to them. There's enforced leisure. It brings out the best in certain people. We're reminded of our mortality. We have to think about what we truly need and what we can do without. There's less traffic on the roads. There are less aeroplanes. People have stopped bleating about transgenderism. Extinction Rebellion protesters have stopped digging up green spaces and wearing hideous costumes. You got more time to tidy up your sock drawer and throw out that old underwear you'd be ashamed to get ill wearing. Or, and this is a big one, perhaps this is the world saying, hey, enough's enough. I'm going to get rid of you lot and start again with some new interesting species. Now there's a thought. What would it be like, this new species? Use your imagination. In doing this, debits and credits, you're exploring possibilities. You're allowing different thoughts. You're taking ideas for a walk. You are gaining control over what was before merely depressing. You're amusing yourself. You're moving between serious and playful registers. You're alive. Another thing you do is magical thinking. I often do it as a doodle. So, you know, there was something I was frightened of a while ago, scared about in my life. And so I started doodling it, and it turned out the one I was eventually happy with was this doodle. This fear was a big green blobby man. And so, you know, I did several drawings of him. And my relationship then with the fear changed slightly. So imaging things, creating images, is a form of helpful psychological control, not the other way round. Image making can be a great route through life. Also, it puts you in touch with what Stephen King calls the boys in the basement. You're reclaiming the unconscious as a journey full of delights and dangers, and a place where images, ideas and thoughts and events can be rehearsed and explored. I think many of my books and dramas often attempt this and often fail, but at least I try. The point is you're in control and you're having fun. If it seems silly, all the better. The more you do this, the more expansive your imagination and thinking will become. You are liberating yourself from orthodoxies and paranoia and creating a personal, private landscape. Then the world starts to crack open rather than shut down. And drawing helps you think. You don't have to be good at it. I'm not. I think what we're frightened of is fear itself, and underlying this fear of COVID-19 is the universal stench of mortality. It's the collective skull on the desk. It's not just the virus that's frightening us, but the fact that it's a reminder of our collective mortality. And that's not a bad thing to reflect on. The death cafe culture in this country showed that it's neither morbid nor depressing to talk about dying. On the contrary, not talking about it makes it a fearful cloud always hanging over us. In Mexico, there is the Day of the Dead. It's a day where you communicate with those gone. You celebrate them. It's a day of laughter and irreverence and colour. It's a holiday. Death is viewed as a natural part of the human cycle. Mexicans view it not as a day of sadness, but as a day of celebration, because their loved ones are reawakened imaginatively and celebrate with them. A couple of years ago, I visited someone very close to me in Bali, and nearby is Sulawesi Island, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that properly, where the Torajan people proudly display their dead relatives after they've dug them up and dressed them in new clothes. And this is an ancient ritual that's meant to show respect for their late loved ones. Every 3 years, they exhume their dead. They wash them, dress them in fresh clothes, and pose for family photographs with them in a festival. And this ritual translates as the ceremony of cleansing corpses. It's been going on for more than a century. So death is not a final step, but one step in an ongoing communication with those who've gone. Now, I'm not for a moment suggesting anyone does that, please, no. But my point is, we have such a fearful, narrow conception of death that it's always something dark and terrible. And this virus has brought that fact scuttling out of the woodwork. And now it's there, it's something to think about, and thinking seriously about things is never time wasted. And let's remind ourselves we've been here before. When AIDS first hit, perfectly rational people were thinking you could catch it from coffee cups, shaking hands, breathing AIDS air. We just didn't have the information. But after the panic, disseminated often by mainstream media, we learnt more facts about it. And so it was terrible, but we understood more about it. And we do love a good plague fear. Last year, the same media, including The Sun and The Guardian, predicted a return of mad cow disease. At the time of this disease in the 90s, we were told up to 500,000 could die. It was 177, I think. The point is, don't faint at media alarmism. Be vigilant, take care, but keep thinking.